Good morning, good afternoon, and good night. Welcome to everybody watching or listening live or on demand, wherever you are in the world. This is the Makeshift Managers Podcast. My name is Austin. That's Devin.
We are back, my friends. Austin, how was your week off?
I worked, so it didn't feel like a week off per se, but I get what you're saying. I feel you. It was fine. I didn't realize I had scheduled myself to work Memorial Day like the week before, and I was like, "Oh crap, I can't podcast."
Memorial
Day.
I
live in California, so I got to make like $300,000 a year to survive.
Hey, man, rent's doing it's always going up. You like sunsets, you like the coast, and if you like the mountains as well, yeah, congratulations. We're foreclosing everybody. Buy one get one free special. Yeah, no, it's
everything must go.
Elections are next week as well. If you live out in California, don't forget Tuesday, vote in your primaries. I don't care who you vote for, but, civic duty, civic responsibility, whatever we call it. But speaking of responsibility, Austin, man, they can't keep getting away with it.
No, they can. They can.
And they will.
And they will. Let me tell you something. Let me tell you what struck this idea to do this today. I attended the Boston Red Sox and the Oakland Athletics game on Friday night. It was, I wanted to go to a baseball game. I don't think the Giants were in Miami. And it was a fireworks night. So, in years past, when the Red Sox come to town, let alone a fireworks night, the Oakland Athletics pull 25 to 30,000 fans. Just those two separate things alone will pull 25 to 30,000 fans in years past. I've grown up around this place. I've been to a lot of A's games in my life. I've seen it. You want to know what a Boston Red Sox fireworks game pulled Friday night? It pulled 17,852. 17,000. They couldn't even break 20,000, let alone 25 or 30. And to be honest with you, Devin, I think that's the best attendance they've had all year. That might be their biggest number all season because it dropped the next two games to about 14, 13. And when you do the seventh inning stretch and it's time to root for the, how many A's I heard? Like 5. I feel like I was at Fenway, but much, much worse because I was in a concrete jungle known as Ring Central Coliseum. I can sit here and bash. Huh?
That's like the doorbell camera?
Yes.
Oh, man. That's almost as bad as Crypto.com Arena. Dude, God.
So
capitalism, baby.
I wanted to do some research on this. The A's, for however long, they have a movie made about it. Moneyball, baby. Billy Beane spending at the least amount possible to get away with it. And let's say that started in 2001, where the movie kind of starts, in the early 2000s. Oakland Athletics were pulling about 26,000 per game. Okay, not bad.
Yeah.
Move over to 2002, they're pulling about 26,000. Okay, again, not bad. And this is the years of the big three, Hudson, Mulder, Zito. They're not a bad team. 2003, they pulled 27,000. Let's go to 2004. What do the A's pull in 2004? And mind you, they're in most of the time, this is like 19th, 18th, 16th in the league. Fans are going to games, but, not as many of them are going to Oakland games. But they're still pulling about 2 million fans a year, which is not bad per se, especially for that market. In 2004, they averaged 27,000 a game. Devin, what do you think they're averaging this year in terms of attendance?
I already have it in front of me, and it's pitiful. It's not even like within – because the thing is, if you look between 21 and so the discrepancy between 23 and 26 is like less than 30 to like 29 damn near. It's crazy. They are dead last by quite a bit.
They are in dead last by over 3,000 fans a game. Miami at 29th pulls 11,500 fans. Yeah. Florida hates baseball. It's a known fact. The Tampa Bay Rays are pulling less than 14,000 a game. The Oakland Athletics are pulling 8,283 people per game. And that, mind you, That is paid attendance.
Yes.
Not all these 8,000 people show up. So what's the problem? Where do you want to start? Do you want
go
to
ahead,
start,
man.
Do you want to start that Al Davis created Mount Davis to make the stadium an eyesore? Do you want to go that we're still peeing in pig troughs? Do you want to go with the sewage problems, the concrete jungle, the fact that there's nothing there to do? And here's the problem that I have. No longer are there fans kind of like you and I. I mean, yes, a lot of older people who are season ticket holders, all you entitled season ticket holders. Ooh, that's another topic for an episode. Let me tell you, not a whole lot of people go anymore to watch a baseball game. You go to the Giants, you go to the Braves, you go to this, you go to that. Name any ballpark, and there's plenty other to do while you watch the baseball game. There's plenty to eat. There's plenty of activities to do. There's plenty of different things to see. You know what there is to see at the Oakland Coliseum when you go to a game?
I cannot tell you.
Yeah, me neither. Me neither, because there isn't anything to do. It's a great place, mind you, to watch a baseball game. The Bay Area is a great place to have baseball games. Very rarely do you ever have bad weather. In California in general, do you ever have rain? Because we're just a drought out here. But let's look at what happened to the A's this offseason. Bob Melvin leaves in December, I think before the lockout, to go down to San Diego, under contract, mind you, which means the A's allowed it to happen. That's where it all started. That's where everyone was like, wait a minute. Where's Bob going? Where's Chris Bassett going? Where's Matt Olson going? Where's Matt Chapman going? Everybody's gone. It's that time of the year, folks. You A's fans have competed for the past 5 or 6 years. It's time to rehaul with prospects and do it all over again. To trade one of the best defensive third baseman and first baseman, for that matter, that you've had since Eric Chavez at third base, winning 6 straight Gold Gloves.
Eric Chavez was a different breed, man.
Eric Chavez is owner of the biggest contract that the A's have ever given out. So congratulations to him. He is owner of a 6-year, $66 million contract extension in 2004. The biggest contract that the A's have ever given out. The Oakland Athletics, along with the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Kansas City Royals, have never given a player $100 million. Now, the A's tried, but they tried to lowball. To nobody's surprise. They tried to lowball Matt Chapman. I believe it was 12 or 11 years at $190 million. Getting him after his hip surgery, after he had declined, but tried to lock him up for years to come. What did Chapman do? What did Scott Boras do? Hell no. You think Scott Boras is going to let him get away with that? Less than $20 million a year for a platinum goal or for a platinum glover? It's just not going to happen. So it prompted this whole thing to where, like, you look at Oakland and it's been a whole thing with moving the stadium. Where are they going to go? Are they going to Vegas? Are they going to go to Howard Terminal? The Pirates are over there bad. Luckily, the Guardians gave Jose Ramirez over $100 million, or else they'd be in this problem too. But then you look at that and you say, Jose Ramirez took a hometown discount, which is something to say about Cleveland. Maybe it's a great place to play. Maybe it's a nice organization. But they weren't going to pay him if he didn't take a cut. You realize that, right? Like, they would have not paid Jose Ramirez if he said, no, I'm not taking a hometown cut.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think Cleveland is a really interesting scenario in terms of these small market teams we're looking at today, just because Cleveland itself, I think, while they are not on the same level as the Twins or the White Sox in their own division, they are far better off than these other teams we're speaking about, just in terms of major league talent on the field currently, and just in general their prospects moving forward. Cleveland always seems to be in the mix regardless of who's around, even more so than what Oakland has been over the last decade to a certain extent. Because for the fact that Francisco Lindor is officially gone in that clubhouse out in Cleveland, Andres Gimenez, or is it Jimenez?
I think it's Jimenez.
Yeah, Andres Jimenez.
Jimenez.
He's a stud. He just like hit a rocket the other day. Like they have young talent, and their pitching is always good. So Cleveland's rocking with something to where I would understand why Jose Ramirez is going to take that hometown discount, because not only is he the face of that franchise, there's a track record with whether it be the manager and Terry Francona or even the front office to a certain extent. While they're not giving players insanely valuable contracts, they have this really good knack for accumulating talent, akin to a team like the Tampa Bay Rays, while the Guardians, while the Guardians / Indians over the last 20 years haven't had insane team success, they have been there and they have done that. They had the Manny Ramirez and Albert Bell led teams that made the World Series in years past. They've had rotations featuring guys like Bauer, Plesac, Clevenger, Shane Bieber's the new hot commodity in their bullpen, not their bullpen, but their rotation. So while there are a number of teams that we will be talking about today, there are defined tiers in terms of destinations, markets, and just overall organizations whenever it comes down to the whole small market. Because for Tampa Bay, I'm not going to blame them for their market necessarily. I'll blame their market for why they can't draw fans, but I'm not going to blame the front office for why fans aren't coming.
Well, the thing is, too, we can get into the Wander Franco contract after we get into the Blake Snell contract, because Blake Snell won the 2018 Cy Young, having one of the best Cy Young seasons recorded in history. He had a 1.89 ERA, 221 strikeouts, 21 wins in only 31 starts, 2 or fewer runs in 27 of his 31 starts, winning 9 straight down the stretch with an ERA of 1.03 in that span. He in one of the hardest divisions in baseball. It has been the hardest divisions in baseball over the past 10 years. And what did they do? They gave him 5 years, $50 million. At the time when Blake Snell was still a Ray, he got 5 years, $50 million. That is an absolute fleece by the Tampa Bay Rays. To get a Cy Young for, look at his breakdown. In 2019, he made $1 million. In 2020, he made $7 million. In 2021, he made $10.5 million. In 2022, he'd make $12.5 million. 2023, he'll make $16 million. And then he gets a little incentives if he finishes top 3 in Cy Young. Now, it's easy for us to look back at this contract and be like, okay, he didn't really jump out after this Cy Young season. But when you take a step back, like let's put ourselves in 2019, to sign a Cy Young and extend him for $10 million a year on average is absolutely nuts, especially given the pitching laboratory that is the Tampa Bay Rays. That contract at the time blew my freaking mind. And now you look at the Franco contract. What's the Franco contract? Like fucking 67 years, $5 billion?
I'll pull it up right now. Sorry, I was looking up some stats on just ownership groups or like the majority owners for these franchises.
Oh, don't do that.
Because that's my biggest thing. So Wander Franco contract. It's like 11 years. So it's an 11-year, $182 million contract with a team option in 2033.
For a guy who had about 60 games under his belt.
It's the largest contract ever given to a player that has less than a full year of service time at the major league level. And I don't hate the deal.
I still do, but this is what small market teams do, right? Like the Tampa Bay Rays right now are only the real small market team who are competing. The A's are god awful. They just went 1-9 on a 10-game homestand. Cleveland's under 500. The Royals are way under 500. The Pirates aren't competing anytime soon. Ke'Bryan Hayes is playing out of his mind, and he's the owner of the biggest contract in Pirates history. And think like how long the Pirates have been around, and they've competed here and there. And for them to never give out a $100 million contract, their biggest contract in free agency history is Francisco Liriano at 3 years, $39 million in 2015, and then giving Ke'Bryan Hayes 8 years, $70 million.
And that is a steal. Well, the thing with a lot of these young players getting these 6 to 10 year extensions is they have leverage. The ownership groups have insane leverage in terms of the first 6 to 8 years of a player's playing career. Like with service time and the manipulation of that, we saw Chris Bryant, his first actual payday out of free agency at almost 30 years old. Like, not only do the teams control when the players hit the bigs, they control essentially at what age they're going to be able to actually cash them out for their major deal. And we just got a new CBA for Major League Baseball, and that's super exciting. But don't get it twisted. Ownership groups don't want to pay the players as much as the players want to get paid. It's the nature of the beast.
Well, the thing that happened in the lockout that stood out to me is that it was this big back and forth between owners and players, right?
Yeah.
Never at any point do I believe the owners would have accepted a player offer. I think I think it's very obvious that the owners were going to be the good guys. Like, our offer was the one accepted. We are always going to say no. We're the owners. We do whatever the hell we want. And I think it's said best when if you take every MLB player right now, kick them out, and then take the next best, like, what is it? Like 800, 765, whatever the number is.
Yeah.
The sport will annihilate. It'll be awful.
The product will be terrible.
If you take these 30 billionaires, kick them out, and put 30 rich guys in, you're not going to notice a damn thing. You're not really going to notice a damn thing. And now you look at the Mets, who spent absolutely insane amounts of money to compete. The Rangers, spent a ton of money, but we still knew they weren't going to compete. We'll dive into them, next year if, did they shoot themselves in the foot? Like, never at any point were they expected to compete this year with all the money they spent this offseason. But they still spent the most money ever in an offseason. And that says something. That means, like, these small market teams need owners to give a shit, or else they're always going to suffer. Like, so is Oakland always going to be this Cinderella story every single time? And yet they haven't won a division series in 20 years, over 20 years.
It's mind-boggling. The biggest thing for me, just because there's so much discussion around salary caps, salary floors, however we're looking to solve this problem of teams just not paying players or trying to field competitive major league ball clubs. Because the weird thing about baseball is it's not as cut and dry as these other sports where you trade players and you trade draft picks and the capital is just fluid in a certain extent. In baseball, there is no trading for the promise of a draft pick. There's no speculating and moving assets to try and get the first overall pick in the MLB draft. You suck, you get the first pick. And there's no flipping that for the next best thing or the next great player. So now we're talking about prospecting. And prospecting is arguably the biggest, I think it's the biggest thing in baseball right now. If you're a franchise that cannot prospect accordingly, you are going to be left behind. Because the future of any franchise is in the farm. The days of taking a team, drafting a couple really good players, ignoring foreign players, and then signing the rest of your team through free agency. Like, if you look at those Yankees teams, a good majority of the players on those mid to late 2000s Yankees rosters, they weren't homegrown Yankees draft picks. Obviously, Jeter. And then you had guys like Rivera. I think did Pettit start out a Yankee? But a lot of those guys came through signings as free agents or even through trades. This wasn't some ragtag bunch of teammates that came through the system and just hit this peak at the same time. Aaron Boone was a guy they signed from a different team. You get what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. I feel like we're seeing a lot more in terms of your impact guys in baseball. We're seeing more prospects coming from overseas than we've ever seen in baseball history, at least impact guys, like from the jump. Whether it be your Aroldis Chapmans, your Yasiel Puigs, Yoenis Cespedes, the amount of talent in the MLB that's coming from the Dominican, Puerto Rico, all of these other nations, it's insurmountable. There's a reason why Atlanta was poised to win a World Series over the last 3 years. They were knocking on the door for God knows how long, because they played the game extremely well with these foreign prospects. Ronald Acuna Jr. went from a guy that I'm sure he was one of the top prospects in his signing class, but they brought him in, they brought him along in the system, and they were smart enough because the thing that the Braves did is not foreign or alien to anybody in terms of just the principles of like getting a return on an investment. If you get in on something early, essentially you're going to get the best deal on something. And then by rule of nature, if If you get it cheaper, you can eventually flip it for more. But they doubled down on their young prospects in guys like Albies and Acuna, while the Braves ownership group is worth a lot of money. John C. Malone has the third highest net worth out of all of the owners in Major League Baseball. So while what they did was very smart with Acuna and Albies, they have the money to pay them much more, because I think Malone's worth $6.6 billion as of right now. But he made this maneuver in a way that we're seeing now with front offices out in Tampa Bay that are worth far less than what Malone is. It's about return on investment. And I think more teams that are going to try and be as competitive as possible are going to look at these players that are young and they're transcendent to a certain extent. These meteorites, Franco's, Acuna's, Soto. I'm not going to call them comets, because I think this entire group of players is probably going to stand and withstand for at least 10 years in the league, regardless of what their peaks and the longevity will be. They should make it to the minimum service time for their pensions based upon their talents. So these meteorites of assets, if you know what you have, commit to it early. Arbitration is a hell of a thing. If you want to get into a constant argument with your best player on your team, go ahead and just keep playing the arbitration game. But if you're smart, you give them more money up front. You say, okay, you are a great player. We are willing to give you this much more than what you could earn year by year through arbitration, but we're going to get more control on the back end whenever you're entering your prime years. So the Franco deal, he's 22, 23 years old or something like that. It's an 11-year deal. He will not be a free agent until at least 30 years old. He's getting more money up front than he ever would have seen through arbitration, but he's missing out on at least a couple of years before his next great payday. And especially in these foreign type players being brought into the States, this isn't just because the thing is, I don't blame any player for accepting any amount of money for any contract. It is life-changing money. For a lot of these players, it is generational wealth. Like Wander Franco's family's future has been forever changed based upon this deal he got from Tampa Bay. But it's extremely hard for individual talents, especially coming from overseas, to turn down north of $100 million. And teams understand this.
I mean, do you remember when the A's signed Yoenis Cespedes?
Mm-hmm.
That was insane. I think they gave him 4 years, $36 million. The A's were the best team in baseball.
They're insanely underpaid.
In 2014, though, but the A's were the best team in baseball, was not particularly close. Uh-huh. And what did they do? For the first time in a very long time, they traded at the deadline. They got Jeff Samardzija, and I can't remember the other guy's name. Or no, not Jeff. Oh, yeah, that is the same year. I think they got Samardzija. This might be a different year. I'll get to the main trade. They trade Cespedes to the Red Sox for John Lester. Straight up. Breaking this chemistry that they had. Did they need kind of an ace? Sure. Which ended up costing them the wild card game. But after that trade, they just begin to tank. You kind of take out your heart of the lineup, this chemistry that you had. Like the A's finally seemed like they figured it out. And then all of a sudden, that happens. Like if you look at the AL West, you could probably do this for most. Everybody except the Seattle Mariners have had success within the last 20 years. Granted, the Angels won the World Series exactly 20 years ago and have been in the playoffs very, very quietly. 2002 was an even year. And they've kind of slipped through the playoffs, and now it's this big thing of will Shohei and Mike Trout be in the playoffs? And even with their payroll, they haven't been able to do it. The Houston Astros were world champions in 2016. 2016. Boston was 2017.
18 was Boston. 16 was the Cubs. 17
Oh,
was the
yeah,
Astros.
you're right. Man, I was so confident, too.
You were get dunked on, nerd.
You fucking got him, dude. I got dunked on, brother. Let me tell you. Thought basketball coverage was over. But so you look at the Astros, who won the 2017 World Series, and they've been relevant since 2017 by tanking, prospecting well, and becoming this great team. Well, we know they cheated, but they still had great players in Correa, Altuve, Bregman. Their rotation now is insane, and they filled in the spots they needed with Verlander and Cole. All these guys. The Texas Rangers had great 2010 through 2017, except for 1 year where they stumbled. Due to injuries. The Seattle Mariners the Oakland A's were very competitive in the 2010s. Even in the early 2000s, they were extremely competitive. Even though that they lost in the division series every single time, they got there convincingly most of the time. And then, I bring this up because you talk about prospecting. Let me read you some of the first-round draft picks by the Seattle Mariners, and you tell me how many Hall of Famers you hear. So we're going to start all the way in 2005 with Jeff Clement. In 2006, they drafted Brandon Morrow. 2007, they drafted Felipe Amont. Matt McGeaney in 2007, Josh Fields in 2008, Dustin Ackley in 2009, Nick Franklin in 2009, Steve Barron in 2009. They had 3 first-round draft picks in 2009. Taijuan Walker in 2010, Danny Holtzen in 2011, Mike Zunino in 2012, DJ Peterson in 2013, Alex Jackson 2014. They didn't have a first-round draft pick in 2015. They had Kyle Lewis in 2016, Evan White in 2017, Logan Gilbert in 2018, George Kirby in 2019. So it took them about 15 years to get it right, because Kyle Lewis is a great player. Granted, he's been hurt, but Kyle Lewis was their first good draft pick in about 15 years, it felt like. And Seattle's been this emptiness since 2002. It's
been a void for sure, yeah.
So if you're not going to spend the money, which they went out and they didn't even spend the money. Nope. Their biggest contract ever to a free agent is Robinson Cano. How did that go?
Don't you know?
So, then they had to kind of get on the back of prospecting. They weren't good at that either. They wasted one of the greatest pitchers of their generation in Felix Hernandez. My man tore through the AL West consistently.
Yeah.
And they wasted that time. They pretty much wasted Ichiro's career after his rookie year. We could go through every single team. Are they good at buying? Are they good at prospecting? Are they good at both? Are they good at neither? When's the last time the Pirates have competed? I think they lost to Bumgarner in the wild card game.
Well, those McCutcheon era teams were solid, but they were never really thought to be a World Series contender. They had a 1-year run where McCutcheon was MVP, but beyond that, they didn't have much aside. They had Josh Harrison for a while, a young Garrett Cole, but Pittsburgh's essentially just every other team's high A equivalent with how they move their talent.
Bad trades send them into the void.
Yeah, they bet big on Chris Archer and lost out on a guy like Tyler Glasnow. A big thing for me in this whole just shebang is, especially with these teams that are in the small markets, they do like to flip assets, but at the most inopportune times. For me, what really puzzles my mind with a lot of these teams, because the thing is, when's the last time you can think of a true contender that traded away their best player while still trying to contend? The Yankees don't do that. I've never seen the Giants do that in a playoff run. Usually, teams are willing to give up an asset to try and supplant their team in other ways, but obviously Oakland's not competing right now. But even in the past, they've been like that Yoenis Cespedes trade that you mentioned, correct? In 2014, they flipped him. He was the best player in Oakland. He was one of the best outfielders 100%. In baseball. Cespedes was transcendent in his prime. He was absolutely insane. He held the Mets to a World Series appearance, which, aside from Steve Cohen buying the team, was literally insane to think about. But teams that win at a consistent level and teams that make fans give a shit don't flip their best players in the middle of their windows. They will flip assets.
The thing is, too, you have teams like the Yankees and the Dodgers who make smart signings at the right time to always compete. Do they spend a lot of money? Yeah, sure. The Mets, the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Phillies, the Padres, the Red Sox, the White Sox, the Angels, the Braves, the Astros. There's your top 10 in payroll. But it's taken a very long time for the Mets to get there. The Yankees haven't won a World Series since 2009. They've always been on the wrong side of history over the past 10 years, but they still always stay relevant with these signings like DJ LeMahieu, trade for Giancarlo Stanton, homegrown talent in Aaron Judge, signing Anthony Rizzo. They all have this mixture. They have this good mixture of decent prospecting, So they have decent draft picks, enough money, but not too much money to make insane signings like they did back in the 90s and the 2000s. And decent trades.
Every contender is about 1 or 2 moves before the deadline away from winning the World Series. Even looking at any of the San Francisco Giants teams from my prime of watching baseball from 2010 through 2014, each of those teams had about 1 or 2 moves, adding a bat or an arm that literally pushed us through to the World Series. The Cody Ross deal in 2010, along with Pat Burrell, that was paramount to that entire team making it all the way. It's the thing that these teams get caught up in, for me, especially the small markets, is they're looking for the home run every step of the way. And genuinely, I think re-signing guys for Cleveland and Pittsburgh and Jose Ramirez and Ke'Bryan Hayes is the best step forward. And they need to improve, because if you're going to win the World Series any given year, pitching comes first, superstar bat, and you fill in the rest. Because for as great as having, because the Dodgers are a completely different beast. The Los Angeles Dodgers are the NL All-Star team most years. So I can't speak on behalf of them, but if you look at what the New York Yankees have been doing over the last decade, I think they're damn near the most model organization you could look for as a fan, just in terms of the front office spending the money, developing the talent, and having the cognizance to actually find players, whether it be domestically or internationally, for their farm system. Because yes, there have been some duds, but not only are the Yankees aggressive signing players outright, they're aggressive in signing prospects. They got the number 1 prospect in 2019. His name's Jason Dominguez. It's yet to be found out how good he is going to be on the major league level. People were comparing him to like one of the best prospects ever whenever he was signed. Have not seen that myself yet. But even after getting a guy like Dominguez, they have guys like Volpe in the farm as well, who they got domestically through the draft. New York does everything right, and everything right's are the wrong term to use, but you get what I'm saying. Like, they have this track record, and a big problem for me with the Yankees, and I think the joke is old and it's played out now, was the whole, well, they just buy their team. The Yankees are far past that at this point. They do buy their team, but
it's really, like you can say, they're third in payroll with, $205 million, about $247 million.
Yeah.
But that doesn't cut it anymore. This isn't the 1990s or the 2000s. The Yankees, yes, bought a lot of fucking championships in their lifetime because Hal Steinbrenner could do whatever not Hal or George. Papa Steinbrenner could do whatever the fuck he wanted. Okay, so George Steinbrenner could do whatever the fuck he wanted whenever he wanted, and he damn well did it. He paid whatever it took, and they won a lot of World Series, 98, 99, 2000. They were this close to winning 2001. They won in 2009. And now no longer can you spend all the money anymore because we haven't had a repeat champion in a very long time, in about 20 years at this point. We haven't had a repeat champion since 2000. Yeah. Yes, the Dodgers have gone a lot, but they've barely been able to buy the cool kids say, a Mickey Mouse ring.
The whole point of the entire point of competitive sports is to win. To judge or demean any franchise for doing whatever it takes to win that championship, it's asinine. It doesn't fucking matter. The only thing that does matter in any of this is championships at the end of the day for these franchises. Obviously, winning regular season games is great, and the more you pay for your roster, the more likely your team is going to perform well throughout the entirety of a 162 game season, correct?
162.
Yeah, 180. Holy shit, that'd be a strike. But you get what I'm saying, right? Because a big thing for me is the best team doesn't always win. More often than not, the best team loses. Because baseball outside of the regular season is a completely different game. Because through your 162, you will have maybe a 5-game set at the max against one team. It's like 3 to 4 games, most series, correct? Maximum is like a 5-game.
You never go beyond 4 unless...
Exactly.
This year's been weird because of lockout rescheduling, but you never go usually beyond 4.
Yeah, but whenever it comes down to brass tacks, you do not have to spend the most money to be competitive in baseball. Yes, having a stacked roster is great for a full 162. The Yankees, the Dodgers... I would say the Phillies, but they don't play defense. So your Yankees, your Dodgers, your Red Sox, these juggernauts, even the Blue Jays now, the Blue Jays have the second richest owner in all of baseball as of right now. Like it's Mets, Blue Jays, Braves in terms of net worth of their ownerships. So it helps to have all that money to get you through the full 162 because you can pay the best players to play and you can afford to have that depth after you're paying these massive contracts. But whenever it comes to a playoff run, you're looking for, there's the wild card that's a 1-game playoff. Then you have the DS, the CS, and the World Series. You need 12 wins. You need 12 wins out of a maximum amount of games of 21 after the wild card. You don't have to have the best players to do that. You have to have the best team and the hottest team. It's about consistency and just overall like flexibility. In a lot of the runs.
Here's something for you. The last time a team won a World Series being outside of the top half, being 15th, the top half of payroll is 2003 with the Marlins. They were the 25th opening day payroll when they won the World Series in 2003. Mm-hmm. Since 2003, the lowest ever is 14th. So, yes, you don't have to be in first in payroll. You don't have to be in the top 5 or even the top 10 for that matter to win a World Series. But you have to buy something. Yeah. You have to do something. So, like, you look at, this one talks about, from 2019 backwards. So the Nationals were 3rd in payroll. The Red Sox were 1st. No big shot. The Astros were 12th when they won. The Cubs were 4th. Yeah. The Royals were 12th. The Giants were 10th. The Red Sox were 3rd. The Giants were 8th. Oh, God, too many Giants. The Cardinals were 11th. The Giants were 10th. The Yankees were 1st in 2009. The Phillies were 14th in 2008. The Red Sox were 2nd. So, yeah, there's a decent amount of Red Sox in here, but we know they spend a lot of money. The Cardinals were 11th in 2006. The White Sox were 13th in 2005. So, you don't have to be in the top 10, but you have to buy somebody. It just goes to show that the Moneyball way doesn't work. It doesn't get you over the top. When the A's ran into Justin Verlander in the early 2010s, they were fucked. Now, we could dive into this rabbit hole of, does the MLB want to see these small market teams move on? Could they rig it in a sense to make Justin Verlander annihilate that Oakland A's ball club and make him never move on to the DS? Because I could pull up a 2012 Game 5 of the ALDS. First pitch of the Coco Chris at the bottom of the first was about 6 inches off outside, and it's called a strike. And it's not particularly close. Verlander goes on for a complete game, and he beats the A's. Could you argue that the MLB doesn't want to see a small market team like the Oakland A's in the playoffs? Sure. But you look at that team, you go, is Verlander really scared of any of these guys? There was no defining presence in the lineup because they didn't go out and buy somebody that day. Because they just aren't prepared to face a team 5 to 7 times.
Well, a big thing, too, is I don't care who you are in any given sport, any given Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever day of the week these teams will be facing off against each other. Superstar players get superstar calls all of the time. It's why we're seeing Julio Rodriguez strike out on so many missed third strikes. It's not because Julio Rodriguez is a terrible eye. It's because Julio Rodriguez is a rookie that has not proven anything in the league as of yet. And that's not an insult to him. It's just the formality of the matter. Mike Trout doesn't get rung up on those pitches because he's Mike fucking Trout. He has been in the league. He has paid his dues, and he has been better than damn near anybody else at the current pace he's been on. Superstar players get superstar calls. We saw it in the NBA Finals earlier this week whenever Draymond Green got one tech, and it was like, well, we can't eject him, right? It's just the way shit happens. There's no way to fully explain it, but there's like these idiosyncratic feelings towards players that have been there and done that. You can't disrupt their game whenever something's close like that. They get benefits of the doubt. And I'll tell you one thing. It helps a lot whenever you're in a playoff run and you have those guys that are going to get the benefit of the doubt. Because, yes, it could be a missed third strike. It could be a ball four. It could be him holding up on a swing that actually shouldn't have been a swing. I'm looking at that Max Scherzer game last year where Wilmer Flores got called out swinging on that final strike. He didn't fucking swing, but it's Max fucking Scherzer. It's superstar players get superstar calls. If it was fucking Chris Bryant to bat instead of Wilmer Flores, does it pan out differently? I would like to believe so. And maybe I'm just being a homer, but I think there's actual There's some actual like proof in the pudding with players like that. Superstar
Mhm.
players get superstar calls, and it's not the fault of the players. It's just the society of the game that we occupy. And I think a big thing too, especially with these teams that are refusing to pay players, there's certain teams that are contending right now that are paying for the money and their farm has been destroyed due to moves to win now. We're talking about a team like the Padres. While they don't have the worst farm system, looking at entering the 2022 season, San Diego is number 17 in all of baseball. They are in a win now mode. They're leveraging assets to get better and better and better. That's one thing. They are contending and they are
Well, that's the thing
acting like
too.
it.
As you have your contending number here, you have your farm here. They don't go up together. If one goes up, the other goes down. It's just
That's
simple facts
in
for the
theory.
most part.
if we look at teams such as, because the Giants have a pretty high payroll to a certain extent, they pay a lot of players a decent amount of money. They're not tops in the league, but if you're looking, because the Rangers, they've spent the money, they still have the 9th best farm system. Out of all the teams in baseball that you would like to frame yourself after, it's the Los Angeles Dodgers. They have worked this expertly through the past decade of baseball. They have made some excellent moves in flipping guys that were either past their prime. The Dodgers that have a really good habit of moving assets, whether it be for the better or for the worse, they tend to win out. They're like the antithesis of what the Tampa Bay Rays are, because they make similar moves to what the Rays do in terms of their prospects, superstars, and stuff like that. Like, they're not afraid to trade guys whenever it comes to Matt Kemp, or they traded for guys like David Price, and they've been able to flip prospects and grab other great players, Trey Turner and Max Scherzer. They add and subtract at the same volume to where their farm, as depleted as it may seem, it's still great.
Well, so here's the problem with the Tampa Bay Rays. The Tampa Bay Rays have been to the World Series twice. They're 0-2. I know something about being 0-2 in the World Series. So if you look at the bottom half of payroll, the Texas Rangers are right at 15th because, yes, they spent a lot of money. They committed a lot of money this offseason, but it's still a shit ton of rookies on a shit ton of less than $1 million deals. So they get to go out and spend more money next offseason because that'll be their time. It'll be like, okay, we kind of know who's developed, who's ready, whatever. But let's look at from 20 down. The Nationals, the Reds, the Mariners, the Royals, the Rays, the Diamondbacks, the Marlins, the Pirates, the Guardians, the Athletics, and the Orioles. One of those teams is over 500. It's the Tampa Bay Rays. But they can't sustain and beat a team in 7 games most of the time. They just aren't. They don't have the big names to do it. You could talk about the great moment that Randy Arozarena and Brett Phillips had in the World Series in 2020, but most of that series was not particularly close.
No.
Like, they lost 4 games to... Did they win 2 games? Was it 4 games to 2? Yeah.
It might have been 4-2, yeah. That's why everybody was pissed whenever Snell got pulled.
That makes sense. That rings a bell. But still, you look at these teams and none of them are good. They're all, Nationals are sitting on Juan Soto and waiting to get a king's ransom because they're not going to pay him what he wants.
They're not going to move
pays
him.
They're
not going to move him.
But they're not going to pay him.
I think they pay him before they move him. I think if there's one player for any franchise to fucking give the Brinks, I'd rather pay him and then flip him if I had to, because there's a really nice sweet spot of because there's a definitive sweet spot in terms of the best teams in the league that have the best farms currently. Because I don't care what the Orioles can offer for a Juan Soto. It's not good enough, especially because if I'm trading Juan Soto, I'm not trading him until he's under that massive deal, because it's not advantageous to me whatsoever. Yes, I can get as many prospects as I would like, but I'd like to weaponize his deal and pay him as much as I humanly can and then flip him, because it makes it that much more difficult to surround Juan Soto. Giving him away before he's hit that big contract, I just don't see the advantage for what Washington would be doing unless they trade him all the way to the AL. Because
so here's the thing. As I continue to look at all these payrolls, Is it safe to now assume that everyone below league average will not win the World Series? It hasn't happened in almost 20 years. At any point, if you're below league average is $147.5 million on payroll. The Texas Rangers are right at 15, about $3 million under that. So let's look at playoff teams that are below that. Twins, the Brewers. I'm currently not going to argue the Seattle Mariners. I do not think they're a playoff team. And the Tampa Bay Rays. Any of those three look like they're going to win the World Series to you this year?
I'm telling you, man, if Milwaukee just didn't, if Devin Williams didn't punch a wall last year, I'm still convinced that I think Milwaukee beats Atlanta in
Quite
the DS.
possible.
I think Milwaukee is good enough and deep enough to beat anybody in the NL this year. Obviously, the Dodgers are like the Undertaker / Michael Myers all wrapped up into some fucking like crunch wrap. But like if the Dodgers didn't exist, I don't see a team in 7 that can really beat the Brewers. The Brewers can beat themselves. Don't get me wrong. They did it last year. They fucking lost the second best. They lost one of the top 3 relievers in baseball and still had the best one in Hader going into the postseason. Like, yeah, I don't think there's a definitive favorite for the World Series out of that group of teams. But the only definitive favorite for the World Series this year is LA. The Braves have been on and off diddly shit for most of the year. The Mets started out extremely hot. They've been playing really well. The Yankees, they are the favorite out in the AL as of right now. The Dodgers, until they are beaten in the playoffs, they are the favorite any given year. But I totally get what you're saying. It's very difficult to see them because the problem with it is while the Mets, Dodgers, Yankees have just top end talent, because the Mets are as much as I like to call the Dodgers an all-star team, the Mets are right there with them. The Yankees, not so much, but I think the Yankees have a really nice mix of top-end talent and just supportive guys. Like the emergence of Nestor Cortez is something that the Yankees do a lot of the time. We see a lot of these guys that come through their farm and come through their high A, low A, triple A and kind of make a name for themselves. Like I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Andy Pettit's the best pitcher to ever live, but he's one of the best Yankees pitchers over the last 20 years. And he was a Yankee, like through and through. And that's important to what the Yankees culture is. Aaron Judge wouldn't be Aaron Judge if they got him from fucking Cincinnati. Like there's something special about the pinstripes and watching players develop and
here's something
reach their
too.
Potential. Yeah.
The movie Moneyball was created when the A's, the biggest thing is that they won 20 games in a row, which at the time was an American League record, which great story. Don't get me wrong. Ragtag group of guys winning 20 games in a row is fucking great. But they lost in the DS. Yeah. They made a movie about a team that couldn't get out of the division series multiple years in a row. Yeah. And then at the end of the movie, it talks about how the Red Sox wanted to get Billy Beane and incorporate this Moneyball system. He turns it down. He stays in Oakland. Rest is history there. The Red Sox incorporate Moneyball and win the World Series in 2003. They were second in payroll on opening day in 2004.
Well, the problem...
One year for me. But you know what I'm saying? You look at this Moneyball movie and mentality, and it got them to the playoffs.
Moneyball only works. It's like micro versus macroeconomics. Moneyball as a theory and a philosophy is great, but you can only go so far with it. And whenever these teams like Tampa Bay, and even you're seeing teams like the Yankees, find players, DJ LeMahieu was not DJ LeMahieu in Colorado. He was a really, really good baseball player, all-star caliber, but he took a step with the Yankees. The important part for any franchise is finding your guys and maximizing their talents. You're looking for guys that not only play well, are consistent, but fit your team, fit your scheme, and fit your fucking ballpark. Because Colorado, for as shitty as that ballpark is to pitch in, they have a type. They have a group of pitchers, in theory, that should translate to that park based upon spin rates, fastball usage, all of this analytical stuff. And Moneyball isn't some revolutionary bullcrap. It is literally just return on investment. Billy Beane said, fuck, I don't want payroll to be that high because I don't think we can win a World Series. So I'm going to find guys that are high on base, high average, because the whole point's to score runs. Whoop-de-fucking-do.
Why? Because he gets on base.
Exactly. Like, that's fucking great in theory. But you know what's better than players that are getting on base? Players that fucking round the bases.
Scoring runs. Yeah.
Players that round the bases. I don't give a shit if this guy's getting on base, if he's going to hit me for 50 knocks in an entire season. And yes, you need guys to get on base, but you don't need everybody to get on base. Like what these teams...
Stringing hits together is very hard.
It's extremely hard, and especially in today's game. Because, yes, the Dodgers, the Mets, and the Yankees, and all these great teams have these mashers and these larger-than-life players on larger-than-life contracts. They also have the foresight and the wherewithal to bring in guys, whether they be prospects or free agents. Like, if I had to list on like my right hand the number of players that have gone from the Dodger system and excelled in other areas, I would need an entire booklet. The Dodgers are essentially like the yellow brick road for MLB players. I would not be surprised if any prospect they trade pans out. And O'Neal Cruz, the crown jewel of the Pittsburgh Pirates developmental system right now, was drafted by the Los Angeles Dodgers. Salvador fucking Perez was a Los Angeles Dodger in the farm system. Like, I don't know what to say to people, but the best teams in baseball are not the best teams in baseball because of their payrolls. That joke is old. That joke is played out. We are far beyond the point of action where scouts are saying that boy nice, and that's why they're getting signed. There is far more science in today's MLB than you ever saw in a chemistry class in 1960. It's just the way that it works. The amount of money and time and effort spent in these organizations looking at not only what they're doing now, but where their bodies project, where their stats are going to project, and what, because the player itself isn't the important part in prospecting or even in signing guys. You're not looking at the person. You're looking at the output. These players are not human beings, these franchises. They are numbers on scatter plots and graphs throughout the next 5 to 10 years. And the best teams know fully well when to move on from some data points and move towards other data points. And the best franchises are able to have because the thing with the Dodgers, love them or hate them, they are literally involved in every major deal that baseball has. They might not get them every single time, but they are a threat to make a move to grab anybody at any given time. As much as I hate to say it, Aaron Judge could be a fucking Dodger if they so well want him to be. They could make that happen because they have the financial backing. But we are seeing now far too often, and yes, this is due to the salaries of the teams, and there is a luxury tax. Teams do have to pay after a certain point a tax on the cap. There's a cap. There's no cap, but there's a luxury tax past certain payrolls. Correct. That's why Boston traded Mookie Betts.
Yes,
and that's where teams go wrong because winning teams drive in more revenue. Look at Golden State. There's a hard cap there. They've been paying for the luxury tax for the majority of the last half decade. They don't give a shit. Golden State prints money. Steph's jersey sales, tickets, concessions, season tickets, you name it. Merchandising, branding, any of it. Just name it. The Golden State Warriors print money. The Los Angeles Dodgers print money. Whenever you not only have the market, you have the front office, and you have the individual talent, the money is just a formality. And I can't tell you how many ownership groups are solely invested in baseball. And if that's the case, genuinely, I don't think moving forward, the MLB there should be a salary floor or a net worth floor for people that are trying to buy into baseball. I don't
think. And the thing is, too, like when I first started this episode, we talked about the Oakland Athletics issues with attendance.
Yeah.
And the problem that they have. They can move to Vegas. They can build Howard Terminal. It doesn't fucking matter how many fans show up at that point. If their payroll, what's their payroll right now? $48 million.
Yeah.
Their payroll is $48 million, which
More
is
than
second to last in the league. More than the Orioles, but at least the Orioles seem to be trending up a little bit. But the thing is, they can build this new stadium. But if they don't build a roster, nothing matters.
Yeah.
People aren't going to show up because they're tired of the same shit every year. It is obvious now that being Moneyball doesn't get you where you want to go. Where do you want to go? You want to win a fucking World Series. That's what you want to do. That's what all 30 teams want to do. That's what they do going into it. Did the owners go in thinking that? Not all of them, but that's the goal, is to win it all. Only one team gets to do it every year. Doesn't matter if you do it in a new stadium or if you do it in the fucking parking lot. If you don't build a roster with money, it doesn't matter what you build after that.
And I genuinely think, and the Dodgers are the perfect example of this in terms of baseball currently, there is no cap on how many years in a row you can get the top prospect in all of baseball in terms of international signing. Teams like the Dodgers are not complacent because there's a reason why they not only got a guy in Mookie Betts in 2018 and proceeded to follow that up by trading for Freddie Freeman in 2022. This shit isn't happenstance. There's a reason why they were able to get Mookie Betts a year prior, and then in that next year, pick up a guy in Trey Turner and fucking Max Scherzer. The best teams in baseball spend the most money. They don't always spend the most money, but they are the most engaged, and then they are the most intelligent more often than not. Because yes, what Tampa Bay does is incredibly smart and incredibly analytics driven. The money just isn't following them as much. I think in the future, Franco's deal to me is giving me a sign of greater things to come. But what Los Angeles and these teams are doing is, yes, they are trading assets from the farm to fuel the major league roster. But at that same time, they're not sitting on their hands each signing period. They're still aggressive in bringing in even more people, whether it be through the draft or international signings, to refortify the farm.
That's the thing, too. You can say that you're like, oh, fans don't show up, so we're not going to spend. The excuse is dead. You've been doing it for 20 years. The Los Angeles Dodgers have an older stadium. It's 60 years old. Dodger Stadium at Chavez Ravine is 60 years old. They draw almost 48,000 fans on average per night. Why? Mm-hmm. Because they win. Because they put a roster together with good prospects and good money. What do the A's try and do? Try to do it as cheap as possible. And who doesn't show up? Fans. Why? Because it just doesn't get them what they want. It's the same story every year. And now it's going to be the same story for the next 5 years as they continue to lose. Because it's time to restart the process because it didn't work again.
Well, I for every gripe about a salary cap and a salary floor for MLB franchises, I'm tired of it. Genuinely. If they want to fix the fucking problem, get the cheap owners out. Genuinely. I think there needs to be a net worth floor to get in to buy a franchise. I myself, if I wanted to open not sponsored by, but a Wingstop franchise, if I want to open my own Wingstop store, I have to have a net worth of $1 million. Baseline, if you want to own an MLB franchise, your net worth has to be at least $3 billion to get in. Like between $2 to $3 billion.
If we had 30 Steve Cohens going at it, we'd be losing our fucking minds.
Well, shit, if you look at the worst teams in terms of paying players over the last decade, I guarantee this. Well, the Brewers have been really good for a good while. They're very smart. So Matt Adonacio, good for him.
But the Brewers have run into the juggernaut Dodgers every time and can't beat them in 7 games.
Yes,
because they just lack a few pieces left that money could buy them.
Like John Fisher wouldn't get bounced because he's worth $2.2 billion, which makes his entire framework for the A's even more just laughable.
Oh yeah, The Oakland Athletics owner is one of the richer ones among them all, and he's still a cheap bastard.
No, yeah, he's like top 15, easy. My biggest thing right now is there should be no Robert H. Castellini's owning MLB franchises. The day and age of a Major League Baseball team, like take it from a Lakers fan. I love the Buss family. I love what they've done for basketball, what they've done for the Lakers. Basketball is their source of revenue. That is not conducive to being the best franchise possible. The best franchises in sports are headed by super groups of individuals that don't make their money off of baseball. Owning a baseball team is like a hobby for the hyper elite and the hyper rich. Yes, you can make money off of it, but it shouldn't be your sole source of income. Everybody likes to talk about passive revenue nowadays. whenever Castellini is only worth $400 million, that's a problem. Juan Soto will make that and more over the course of his MLB career. He may even double it, depending on how contracts are structured. It's mind-boggling whenever you have franchises that are worth more than the net worth of the owners.
And the thing is, you can't compare this to other sports because everyone else is capped.
Yes.
Everyone else is just about on the same playing level. Granted, every sport has really bad teams. Every sport has tanking teams. You know, the Thunder have 900 first-round picks, but you can't do that in baseball.
Yep.
You can't stack first-round picks in baseball, so you have to spend money and make sure you get your picks right. And when you don't do either of those, this is where you end up. You look at the Golden State Warriors, who had their super team, and they still lost to a LeBron James-led team at one point. You know, you look at, hockey hasn't had a repeat winner in a long time.
The Lightning just won it back-to-back years.
Shit, you're right. I think before that was going to be my point. But
no, I get you.
I got ahead of myself. You're right. The Lightning are going for a three-peat, but they're in trouble. But
2-1, yeah. We haven't seen an NFL champion back-to-back in a while.
Since the Patriots, right?
Yeah, back in the 2000s. Winning is extremely hard.
It is. But winning is extremely harder when you don't, you have to buy some wins here and there. You know why the Texas Rangers hopefully aren't going to lose 100 games this year? Because we went out and spent a little bit of money. Like, we have just been as bad as long as Pittsburgh and Baltimore and Kansas City. We've been right there with them. And now we've hopped over them. You know why? Because we spent money. I'm not saying we're winning a World Series in the next 5 years. I would love to. But I'm saying we hopped these teams in rebuild mode because we just went out and fuck it. Let's buy some players.
Mm-hmm.
In Simeon, Seager, Gray, Calhoun. We have more spending to do, but we get to hop these teams because we spend money and they don't.
Yeah, and it's all fine and dandy, and it's great. Because if Oakland was like Los Angeles and the Angels and spent all this money and they just couldn't figure it out, that's defensible. At least they're making the effort to be competitive and competent in that front office. But there's only so much you can justify trading your assets for more assets whenever you're just going to flip those assets whenever they're due for roost. Essentially, Oakland has turned into this just cash farm for other franchises. And that's the major problem with all of this small market deep diving shit.
Because if you could just take a guess real quick, if you could just take a guess who has ever gotten the biggest free agent contract from the Oakland Athletics in history, who would you think it was?
I know who it is because you mentioned it earlier. If you guys were paying attention, you're going to be like, wow,
no.
I can't believe I forgot.
That's the largest extension they've ever given.
Free agent contract. Okay.
The biggest free agent contract they've ever given was 3 years, $30 million to Billy Butler.
If I had a tiny violin, I'd be right in the mic just going to town. It's insane. It's like that scene from I Think You Should Leave where I forget what his name is, but he's the main character, Tim Robinson. He's in the hot dog suit. He's like, we're trying to find who did this. It's like you did it to yourselves and you're continuing to do it. And it's the definition of insanity is doing the same shit and expecting a different result. And it's very hard to run major league franchises, but you can only do the same thing so often and get the same result and not eventually try and change something. Because
and the thing,
that's the difference between, because what we're seeing now with these smaller markets, whether it be Detroit or Pittsburgh or even Miami to a certain extent, there's teams that are trying. There are teams like Baltimore that is following this Houston model over the last half decade they did, where they acquired Springer, Bregman, Correa, Altuve, and they built that team from the ground up through drafting and through prospecting and some very, very advantageous trades. The Orioles, for lack of better terms, have drafted their ass off over the last half decade, and now they're finally recovering from one of the worst contracts they've ever given out. Oakland isn't giving out contracts. They're not being penalized for it, but they're not paying the guys that they develop. So they're getting a bunch of wins. They're getting no revenue from the fans because they're shipping anything that's worthwhile out. It's really hard to get somebody to fucking invest in the team whenever if I'm buying this player's jersey, I'm going to have to replace it in less than 3 years. Because
I got my girlfriend a Chapman jersey for Christmas in 2020.
Yeah,
I can't afford to go buy her another jersey because who the fuck am I going to buy her? Noisy? Sheldon fucking Noisy?
It's gotten so bad that there are literal deals with Capital One where there's jersey insurance for NBA jerseys. So if your favorite player gets traded to a different team within the first 2 years of you buying that jersey, the next one's on Capital One. This shit's not rocket science. If you want people to commit to your team, commit to your fucking self. Give them a reason to care. Sign the big names. Keep players on your team that are actually a part of the team.
The thing is, most of these teams have tried. The Marlins have definitely tried.
Yeah.
They extended Stanton extremely because he was the face of their franchise.
If Jose Fernandez never dies, I don't think Stanton gets traded. Genuinely, Yelich and Stanton and Real Muto probably stay for a window where they're competing for the NL East.
Justin Bour was good as a Marlin. Like, they had the face of their franchise in position. They had the face of their franchise in pitching, Jose Fernandez.
Had pillars around them. Those were some very talented teams.
And Jose Fernandez passing away.
Yes.
Regardless of your opinion on it, shifted that franchise. The Seattle Mariners, we get it, haven't been to the playoffs in 20 years, but they have tried. They paid Robinson Cano's
PEDs. Like, if Robinson Cano doesn't get popped, I think Seattle makes the playoffs one of those years. Like, there are these catalyst events that change decades worth of baseball for some of these franchises. And it's tragic, but I don't understand whenever the one thing causes you to crater for a decade. That's just me. Because it's one thing to let a setback push you back a little bit, but to let it bury you, I just find the lack of pride in the product from ownership groups to be concerning, first and foremost. Because if the ownership group in Oakland was putting a good product out or renovating the stadium or trying to at least proactively stay in Oakland, I could give a shit. But it's the fact that these franchises not only don't care about the fans, but the communities and the towns that they call home. It's a slap in the face. Because genuinely, most of these stadiums, most of these super rich, hyper elite people make their money off of the backs of the working class and off of tax breaks that us as taxpayers eventually pay for. It's tough shit to swallow. And I have a very hard time feeling bad for a guy by the name of, what's his fucking name? Let's look for him. Pardon my French. John W. Henry. It's hard for me to feel bad for a guy whose net worth is $2.6 billion and he doesn't spend his money to give his fans that work 80 hours a week, sometimes more. Huh?
Who does he own?
Henry? Oh, that's the Red Sox. So John Fisher for the Athletics. That's
John Fisher.
Yeah. But it's sour grapes. Like, let me get the world's smallest violin for you.
Oh, well, fans don't show up. Well, what have you done?
Make them show
20
up.
Years?
Make it compelling. And I get it. Oakland is not San Francisco. It is not Los Angeles. There is a different level of affluence to those areas.
Correct.
But I don't care where the team is located. If you bring the product, the people will come. If you price them out, that's your own fault. But you bring the product, the people will come. It's as simple as time. You want to know why the San Francisco Giants have such a big fan base? Because the team and ownership fucking care. Even whenever we sucked, they fucking cared. You want to know what was great about San Francisco? While we didn't win a World Series throughout the late 90s, early 2000s, we had the best player in fucking baseball. Because if you're not going to win it all, at least give the fans something to cheer for. And yes,
and even last year, you tried.
We made moves to try and win now. And we didn't give up our entire future for it. Like, I'm not asking Oakland to leverage Langoliers and Soderstrom to build a win now team. But I'd love for them to try and keep on a guy like Chapman or keep Manaea or keep Montas. You don't have to fire sale just because you don't feel like winning this year. If everybody had a fire sale every year they didn't win the World Series.
It was a September collapse. They were in the race up until September, and then they just plummeted, and all of a sudden it's like, well, we can't win with this team, so let's lose for 5 years and try and get a new one. Like, no.
This is the
If you could keep
franchise.
Chapman for 10 plus years, most like they flash franchise leaders a lot during the games.
Mhm.
And a lot of them are just like, obviously Ricky Henderson's up there for stolen bases.
Yeah,
He
of
won't
course.
be broken. But I
McGuire
don't
was
think
up there for a while.
I think that McGuire is their home runs leader, and he has less than 400 as an Oakland Athletic.
Mhm.
I think Bert Campaneris is their franchise hit leader. I could be wrong, but it's less than 2,000.
Yeah.
There's just nobody sticks around Oakland long enough. If you keep Matt Olson becomes your franchise home run leader, and it's not particularly close. He would hit 400 to 500 roughly if he he had a great year last year. Maybe he drops off a bit, but if he's hitting 25, 30 a year for the next 10 years, Matt Olson is your franchise home run leader. Maybe even RBIs and hits, but you just don't commit to players like that.
Well, even looking at some of the worst teams that we've had over the last 20 years, most franchises have their forever guy. The Giants, for as bad as we were for portions of time, yes, Posey had 3 World Series rings, but Buster Posey was a Giant for the entire lifetime of his career. Derek Jeter, a forever Yankee. David Wright, a forever Met. Chipper Jones, forever a Brave. Even some of the league's worst teams. Ryan Zimmerman played through a lot of shitty Nationals years, but he sat through it and he fucking retired a Washington National.
Like, I bet you Jose Altuve is retiring
a forever
an
Astro. Exactly. And yeah, baseball teams tend to suck for a portion of any star player's career. It's how it works. The league comes in waves. Even if you're looking at the Dodgers or even the Padres, there's a laundry list. Oh, what the fuck is his name? Jake Peavy. He was a guy. He was out. He left San Diego eventually, but he was one of those longtime Padres that
he's
never
stuck
really
in there for a long time.
And we don't see that anymore, not because of the players, but because of the teams around those players and the front offices making the decisions.
Right.
Blake Snell didn't want to leave Tampa Bay.
The problem
he was forced out.
That players know that owners don't give a shit about them.
Yep.
And it forces them to leave.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
The best comparison in today's game is going to be Mike Trout. He will retire a Los Angeles Angel for better or worse. But that's how franchises should treat superstar players. And yes, Matt Olson, he's not Mike Trout. Even Wander Franco, he's not Mike Trout. But damn, if you see a guy that's been the best you've had in the last 20 years and you let him walk, nobody's going to feel sorry for you. And nobody should feel sorry because you're creating your own problems without even trying to give yourself a solution. And yes, you can trade as many players as you want for prospects, but it only matters if they pan out. And in Oakland's case, we're still waiting to see if anything's going to pan out. And maybe it's because they don't like playoff teams, or maybe it's because they don't give a shit about the fans. I think Oakland's just going to be screwed to forever repeat this cycle until that team is shipped off somewhere else.
Yep. Something has to change, and I don't know what it is at this point. John Fisher has to sell the team. It's a joke.
The small market teams, for lack of better terms, if you're a fan of one of these teams, I commend you, and I respect the hell out of you. And to be honest, as a Giants fan, I'm not here for the owner of the Giants. I'm here for the franchise. And I thank the owner for being able to put his own ego aside and open his checkbook and wallet and pay for what he believes is fair and just for his team. And I just wish every owner would take the same amount of pride.
Haven't Belton Crawford also been Giants their entire life?
Precisely. We got Brandon Crawford and Buster Posey in the same draft. The best shortstop in Giants history and the best catcher in Giants history in one draft. And that's all it takes. It takes a commitment from front office to management to your skipper to the players. If you take care of the people in-house, they're going to take care of you. But what we're seeing at this lower level of the pay scales for these franchises is nobody's taking care of anyone. And until there's just a systemic change, especially in Oakland, there's no way to see a light at the end of the tunnel. At least in Kansas City, Cincinnati, and Tampa Bay and Pittsburgh, they have a direction. They have young guys, and they have a blueprint they're following. Oakland's doing the same shit they've been doing for 20 years. And until they finally say, fuck this, Moneyball was great, thanks, Billy, but something has to change, they are going to be a prisoner of their moment until it's taken from them.
Yep. So, honestly, dude, we could do this for hours on end.
Yeah.
I could talk about, we could talk about each franchise and their player. Even the Orioles had Cal Ripken. Like, I know the money wasn't
Adam
there.
Jones.
The money wasn't there back then.
Yeah.
Guys did not make back then what they make now. But they still, commitments at some point in their franchise have made commitments to players.
I think my final point is a lot of these small market teams get caught up in the fact that they're going to have to pay a certain player a lot of money. Look at the Orioles with Manny Machado. It's not the fact, because the problem is they get caught up in the fact where, there's not value here for us.
Right.
If you let them walk, there's no value inherently at all. You could trade them, yes, but Manny Machado as an Oriole was the best player they've had since probably Ripken in terms of position guys. And I get it. I know why Bryce Harper left the Nationals. They had Juan Soto in the farm, and obviously they didn't expect him to be Juan Soto to the point that he is. But it works if you have a contingency plan. But if you're just not going to re-sign Aaron Judge because you're just at an impasse in terms of money, that's not the point to not re-sign them. Right. Too many teams nowadays, especially on the lower end, do not have a contingency past letting the guy walk or trading him for something that's 25 cents on the dollar or 75 cents on the dollar.
Yeah, but, you're completely right. All right, I think that's going to do it for us. We could, like I said, we could do this all day, every day.
I didn't even go off on a Barry Bonds tangent today either. I'm getting better about that.
Oh, man. So, for anyone who sat through our tirade, live or on demand, thank you. If you have input, hit us up. We love talking about this kind of stuff. Like I said, it might be another episode in the future whenever the A's decide to move or the Orioles decide to compete or something like that. Something might happen. We'll see. Who knows? So next week, we're going to do another deep dive. We're going to go into pace of play. We'll have a guest for that one, so we're super excited for that. Pace of play is a whole different. Welcome to the Rob Manfred era.
Yeah.
So we'll deep dive into that. The week after that, we'll do the NBA draft, the NBA mock draft, I should say.
Woo! I'm excited for that one.
We'll have a guest for that one too. Disclaimer: I might not be here. This is for that one. We'll see. I'm starting a new job. We're hoping Devin, he's working, getting on a new job.
Eventually, we'll see.
Our schedule is going to get thrown around a lot, but
yeah,
we're always here every Monday, whether it be a little later or a little sooner.
Yep. Well,
Devin, do you have any finishing points?
Everybody be safe. COVID is starting to run through the nation once again. Not going to tell you to get vaccinated if you're not. That's your choice. But be mindful of everybody around you, and masks help. So everybody stay safe, stay healthy, and be smart. Like I said before, California's primary elections are this Tuesday coming up, so tomorrow. If you haven't voted yet, get out there. I don't care who you vote for, but civic responsibility, civic duty. I'm looking at you, Oakland A's. Have some fucking responsibility. But if you have nothing left, Austin, I think they got one word left for him. From the makeshift managers to everybody listening at home, on demand, or live, thank you for joining in. We appreciate everybody being here. And as always, peace.